I'm Jason UFC, and today we have a story about UFC President Dana White says Glover Teixeira will fight Jamahal Hill for the vacant UFC light heavyweight title at UFC 283 in Brazil. UFC President announced Glover Teixeira and Jamahal Hill will fight for the vacant UFC light heavyweight title at UFC 283. He said this at the um, press conference of UFC 282. Right after the main event, UFC President Dana White called the vacant light heavyweight title fight between Ankalaev and Blachowicz terrible and indicated the title challengers had no one to blame but themselves after UFC 282 main event ended in a split draw. What are you going to do? Dana White asked incredulously. I think the main event was terrible. What are you going to do? UFC 283 takes place January 21st in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. On Saturday night, the promotion indicated a fight between Brendan Moreno and Davison Figueiredo will serve as the main event. Obviously, those plans changed after UFC 282. In the aftermath of the UFC 282 main event, Jamahal Hill proposed a different matchup, asking Dana White to book him against UFC commentator and top light heavyweight contender Anthony Smith. Me and Lionheart Smith for the belt now, is what Jamahal Hill tweeted to Lionheart Anthony Smith and UFC Dana White and matchmaker Mick Maynard. Reach for a comment. Hill's reaction to the news was brief but clear. Let's go. Jamahal Hill wrote MMA's fighting in a text message. Hill later cut a promo to celebrate the new Hill. Jamahal Hill react to getting the title fight against Glover Teixeira. Teixeira was cage-side for the UFC 282 main event, tried to go into the octagon afterward to face off with the winner, but he could not be reached for comment after the decision was announced as a split decision draw. The Brazilian ex-champ Glover Teixeira was scheduled to face Yuri Prochazka for the vacant title before a severe shoulder injury caused Yuri to relinquish his undisputed UFC light heavyweight belt, and then the fight between Ankalaev and Jan Blachowicz was then booked as the main event for the undisputed light heavyweight championship belt, but that ended in a split decision draw. Okay, now Teixeira gets what he get his wish on a timeline for the fight in Brazil, UFC 283 against a new opponent. Jamahal Hill has won 3 straight fights, including a stoppage of one-time title contender Thiago Santos in his previous bout. I believe that was in October. So it's kind of a quick turnaround for Hill. I think he did take some damage in that Santos fight, but he's gonna have November and December, and basically now he's gonna start having to prepare for Teixeira. That's not gonna be easy for Jamahal Hill. He does have a loss in the UFC to Paul Craig, I believe. I don't know if that was his first fight, but he does have a loss. He's 11-1. Jamahal Hill is 11-1 in his UFC in his MMA career. So he only has one loss on his record, and that was against Paul Craig. Some people, I don't know if people are really upset. I would say I see why the UFC is doing this, even though it ended in a split decision draw. I think the initial thought was, okay, well, they're going to fight again, and that fight will be for the title. But, I think the UFC is kind of looking at this as they just want to get the belt on someone. This was a mess when Yuri shoulder got injured. People were wondering why this fight wasn't for a interim title, the Ankalaev versus Bakovic. Why wasn't that just for an interim title? And with Yuri coming back next year, but Yuri is clearly going to be out for a while. I don't know if the UFC demanded that he gives up his belt. It seems like they kind of pushed for it, but it seems like it was the right thing to do on all accounts. Yuri probably, didn't defend his belt. There would be no reason for him to be the champion, and the UFC just plays around with interim belts for like the next year and a half. Yuri's going to be out for at least all of 2023, and now UFC tried to get an undisputed champion with Ankalaev versus Blachowicz. They made that from co-main event to main event for the undisputed light heavyweight championship title. That fight ended at UFC 282 last night. That fight ended in a split decision draw. So the UFC is looking at it like, you know what, right now we have a vacant light heavyweight title. Blachowicz versus Ankalaev was originally not scheduled for a title fight. So with that fight ending in a draw, obviously, you have Dana White didn't seem too thrilled with how that fight went. So there's no reason to give those two another title shot. With it ending in a draw, both fighters are going to be out for a few 3-4 months at least. Instead of having the title being vacated by Yuri or being held by Yuri for over a year and no one being undisputed, they tried to give it to Ankalaev and Blachowicz. That fight ended in a split decision draw. Now they're just like, you know what, let's just move on again. Let's just give, Jamahal Hill a title shot versus Glover Teixeira. Obviously, worst case scenario is that if that fight ends in a split decision draw, then who knows what happens there. But with, like I said, with the fight being, with the title, UFC title, UFC light heavyweight title being basically vacant at the moment, I agree with the idea of Glover Teixeira fighting Jamahal Hill for the belt. The one huge surprise that I would say I saw was that Dana White made the announcement at the press conference of UFC 282. As I noticed that he didn't look pretty happy. He seemed pretty pissed off, obviously, about the results. Obviously, no one would be happy with a split decision draw. But one thing that I noticed is, Dana White almost never really announces fights at post conference of the events. He usually gets pissed off at the reporters who ask him to, match make 5 minutes after the event happened. So it seems like he was really, because I don't know if they was really even that prompted. Like, hey, Dana, what happens next? He kind of just came out. There was like maybe 1 or 2 questions, and he just kind of put it out like, yeah, what are you gonna do? We're just gonna move on, and the next fight will be Teixeira versus Jamahal Hill for the title. We're not even, don't even ask me anything else. We already have it booked. It's already set. We're not even gonna waste any more time with this. We normally don't do matchmaking after the event, but Dana White just came out, put it out there, like, listen, we're just gonna move on. This has been a complete, disaster from when Yuri got injured his shoulder. He's gonna be out for a year. He had to give up his belt. Then we tried to give it to Ankalaev versus Blachowicz for the main event of UFC 282. That fight ended in a split decision draw. It was a terrible fight. It wasn't a great fight. I wasn't impressed with either fighter. So you know what? We're just going to move on. And the next fight, the next pay-per-view, UFC 283, we're going to try this again. And we're going to try to finally crown an undisputed UFC light heavyweight champion. And we're going to give the title to the winner of Teixeira versus Jamahal Hill. Jamahal Hill and Teixeira was not booked for UFC 283 before last night. So I would imagine maybe right after UFC 282 ended in a split decision draw, I would imagine, with Jamahal Hill reaching out to Dana White. You can see, let me see the time. That was 10:15 p.m., right? So this happened like a few minutes after the main event ended. Jamahal Hill was tweeting out, hey, can I fight Lionheart for the vacant belt? And UFC, I don't know if they replied to this tweet. I doubt that. They probably went straight to his manager, and they said, hey, if you're available, we have a fight You will be fighting Teixeira, Glover Teixeira, Jamahal Hill. If you're available, you will fight Teixeira in Rio de Janeiro, January 21st, UFC 283, and I guess he agreed, and that's going to be the next fight. I agree with it. I think it makes the most sense. Not a great way for the UFC to end the year with a split decision tie on their split decision draw on their pay-per-view, but the event was a good event for. There was one really, really bad decision, but I thought UFC 282 was a great pay-per-view. I thought it was a great event. There was a lot of finishes, a lot of great performances, but it does seem like the night ended on a really, really, really sour note. Like, UFC fans are pissed off that Paddy Pimblett won. He got a decision, and then the main event ends in a draw. But let me know your opinion of this whole crazy mess. Do you think Jamahal Hill deserves a title shot? Do you think Glover Teixeira deserves a title shot? Do you think Ankalaev deserves a title shot? A lot of people thought Ankalaev won the fight, so he's kind of, getting the short end of the stick. I don't know if Ankalaev and Blachowicz will be scheduled for a rematch, and I don't think that will be for any belt or interim title, or it would basically be number one contender. And I guess the winner of Jamahal Hill and Teixeira will probably fight the winner of Ankalaev and Jan Blachowicz later on in 2023. I think it's the right decision. I don't disagree with the decision. I didn't think the decision for a split decision draw was that bad. It was a very close fight. You can make an argument for Ankalaev winning, probably a little bit more argument for Ankalaev winning than Jan Blachowicz. But you know what? I don't think it was that bad of a split decision draw. I don't think either fighter really won that fight. But I am Jason, UFC. Today we had a story about UFC president names Glover Teixeira versus Jamahal Hill for the vacant, once again, two-time vacant UFC light heavyweight title vacated first by Yuri Pahowski, but when he got injured for the UFC 282 main event, then UFC tried to make Ankalaev versus Bahaus, but UFC tried to make Ankalaev versus Jan Blachowicz for the main event of UFC 282 that ended in a split decision draw. Now UFC is going to make another title fight next month, UFC 283 in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Glover Teixeira versus Jamahal Hill for the UFC undisputed vacant light heavyweight championship belt. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the $1 donation button, and please tune in to the next video on this channel. Thanks a million for watching.